Scope of literature. The scope of literature is anything that can be conceived by the human mind. Literature is that which comes from life of men, and so it envelopes the life of every man from the poor to the filthy rich. Literature allows us to see the world in different vantage points. It enables us to see the world in different perspectives. What is perceived to be good may not be good in your own standard, and the same way what is perceived to be bad may not be necessarily be bad in your own consciousness, because you see things in different angles. Literature relieves history. It has historical grounding, making the readers aware of some important facts in the past to make sense of the present circumstances where we are in. In short, we are able to establish a connection between the past and the present and what tomorrow may bring. Literature links us with the world of which we are part. It helps us understand the people across nations, their cultures, traditions, beliefs, and religious practices, thus making us live harmoniously by recognizing and respecting individual differences. Literature sharpens our senses of moral judgment. It hones our sense of morality, delineating the distinction between art and pornography, right from wrong, moral and immoral, and it enables us to make our personal judgment based on our standard of morality. Literature stimulates our imagination and ingenuity. It fuels our imagination and creativity to reconstruct the plot. These are essential to make sense of any literary work, whether it is read, performed, or viewed. Literature shows significance of irony, paradox, oxymoron, and ambivalence. It acquaints us to different poetic devices and poetic dictions to unearth the message of the poets different from fictionists and playwrights. Most of time it will require us to have working knowledge of literary theories or approaches to recreate the writer's intended meaning. Literature encourages us to develop mature empathy with all forms of life, human, animal, and plant. It nurtures our sensibility and compassion for the environment and everything in it by making us grasp the interconnectedness of life on Earth, that the obliteration of one tree is tantamount to the extinction of animals and plant species, and with that we are reminded to be stewards of God's creation, for the Earth serves as the habitat of all. Literature enables us to transcend our immediate time, place, and culture, and to make connections with other human beings and their concerns. It enables us to break away from or go beyond our present reality through the power of imagination, enabling one to travel through time and space, at the same time establish good human relations by realizing people's angst evident in the literary pieces that we are expected to. Literature helps us grow both personally and intellectually. Since it reflects significant human experiences, it allows us to grow personally by learning from the experience of other people, thus enabling us to handle varied human situations that we never experienced before, and intellectually because it enhances our vocabulary range vis-à-vis our mental faculty, thus making us think critically to articulate and defend our point of view. Literature reminds us that we are human beings. It makes us realize that we have our own limitations, insecurities, and imperfections, that despite our shortcomings, we learn from our experiences of other people, making us better individuals, responsible, self-reliant, fashion, God-loving, and God-fearing. Thus, literature can be viewed from various angles. Some critics interpret literature in its comprehensive sense. Others take its restricted and ordinary meaning. Sometimes literature is implied in a technical sense. It is essential to understand these different interpretations of the term literature. Here the views of Anthony X. Soares are adapted. 1. Literature in its comprehensive sense. 2. Literature in its restricted and ordinary meaning. 3. Literature used in a technical sense. Literature in its comprehensive sense. Literature in its most comprehensive meaning includes all the activities of the human soul in general, or within a particular sphere, period, country, or language, and therefore embraces all manner of composition in prose and verse, scientific or purely literary, set down in writing or communicated by word of mouth. Thus we speak of the literature of Greece, of 18th century literature, of the literature of mathematics or the law, of the Latin or Persian literature. Literature in its restricted and ordinary meaning. In the restricted sense in which we generally employ the term, literature is that class of writing which aims at rousing the feelings of the beautiful by the perfection of form or excellence of ideas or by both. In this sense, literature is distinguished from purely scientific and technical treatises. Works on mathematics, or prosody, or philosophy, would not be literature. Under literature, when used in its narrower meaning, we should include only such works, as, by reason of their subject matter or the artistic way in which they are handled, are of general human interest, and awaken in us one or more of the pleasurable feelings of the beautiful, the sublime, the pathetic or the ludicrous. Such are poetry, romance, history, biography and essays, as opposed to scientific works, or those writings which aim expressly at imparting knowledge. A piece of literature differs from a specialized treatise on astronomy, political economy, philosophy or even history, in part because it appeals not to a particular class of readers only but to men and women, and in part because while the object of the treatise is simply to impart knowledge, one ideal end of the piece of literature, whether it also imparts knowledge or not, is to yield aesthetic satisfaction by the manner in which it handles its theme. It is essential this aspect of literature which was well brought out by the late Viscount Morley when he spoke of it as consisting of all the books, and they are not so many, where moral truths and human passions are treated with a certain largeness, sanity and attractiveness of form. For the much and little, the extent of its scope and yet its brevity, this description of Morley's would be hard to beat, though if it were a question of finding a synonym for the word literature, the French belles lettres, beautiful or polite, polished or refined letters would do admirably well. The French mean by their very expressive and apposite phrase belles lettres would do admirably well. The French mean by their expressive and apposite phrase belles lettres exactly what we mean by our word literature, when we use it in its restricted sense. Literature used in a technical sense, besides the two above senses in which the term literature is commonly employed, there is one in which it is also used, viz., in a technical sense, to designate, in the first place, the study of the rules of literary composition or what is called literary technique, and secondly, to describe the different phases through which the intellectual development of a people has passed, or, in other words, to narrate the literary history of a people. In this latter meaning, a work on English literature would treat of the literary activities of the English people from the earliest times to the present, considered in respect of their national progress, and also of the literary forms, which go on changing from age to age, in which such activities have been embodied. It would give an account of the literary achievements of the different writers from very early times to our own day. It would show how in different ages, different poetic and prose forms were invented and became popular,